Hello and welcome to the Agile Innovation Leaders podcast. I'm Ola Ojiako. On this podcast, I speak with world-class leaders and doers about themselves and a variety of topics spanning agile, lean innovation, business, leadership, and much more, with actionable takeaways for you, the listener. I have with me the legend Jeff Gothelf, who is an entrepreneur, keynote speaker, highly sought after keynote speaker, I must add, coach, and much more. So Jeff, really honored to have you on the Agile Innovation Leaders podcast. Thank you.
It's my pleasure, Willa. Thanks so much for having me. I'm thrilled to be here.
Good. Well, I usually start with a question for my guests to find out more about themselves as individuals. And during our pre-recording session, you mentioned something that was intriguing to me, that you actually played pianos and you were part of a touring musical band. Could you tell us about that?
Absolutely. I've played piano my whole life. My dad plays piano. There was always a piano in the house. And I had pretty big rock star dreams as I was a kid growing up. It's really all I wanted to do. I can remember in high school, everyone's like, what are you going to go to college for? I was like, I'm going to be a rock star. Figure that out. And, I played in bands in high school. I played in bands in college. And towards the end of college, I started playing in a couple of relatively serious bands. Serious in the sense that they were decent bands, in my opinion. They were touring bands, and they made enough money to sustain themselves. They weren't jobs. They didn't sustain us as individuals, but they sustained the band system. And it's fascinating because, at the time I was 19 and 20. I did this really until just about the time I met my wife, which was I was 25. And so I did it until I was about 25. And in hindsight, you don't see it when you're in it, especially if you've never really done anything else. I'd always had jobs, but the jobs were always, I delivered newspapers and I made sandwiches and I was, worked for a moving company, whatever, right? But in hindsight now, it's clear to me that I was being entrepreneurial in those days. The bands, each of them, especially the touring bands, were startups. It's a bunch of folks getting together with a crazy idea, thinking that everyone in the world will love it. It's going to change the world, and doing everything they can and putting everything into helping folks realize that and building that vision and executing on it, and scraping by and hacking things together and hustling and doing what you can to build a successful, in this case, it was a musical group, but it was essentially a startup. And these days, not only do I look back fondly on those days, and all those guys that I played music with are my best friends to this day. We still talk almost every day, but I learned so many skills about being entrepreneurial, about experimenting, about learning, about failure, about iteration, about what's good enough. When do you call it quits? That's a really tough thing to do. Letting something go that you love is really difficult. And I know now, 20 years later, that so much of that experience figures into my day-to-day work today. Even to this day, like if I get a new speech to give, or a new client, or a new assignment, I call them gigs. I got a new speaking gig, I got a new consulting gig, I got a new coaching gig, that type of thing. It's impossible to remove that, and it's amazing to me, really, because at the time, I could not have told you what I just said to you, but in hindsight, it's super clear to me what I was doing and what I was learning, because I've put it to use over and over and over again in my life.
That's fascinating. It reminds me of what one of my mentors said to me, and he said, whenever you're given an opportunity to learn versus, get more money doing what you already know, always choose to learn, because there's no wasted knowledge. So it's more of tying it back to your days, as a musician, as a part of a touring band. You were learning and you're now using those transferable skills, right?
Yes.
And would you say, well, I don't play any instruments, but I used to be part of, different choirs, and my daughter also now does that, kind of sings. But there are times when, things would go wrong and you're finding yourself having to improvise so that the audience wouldn't know, okay, this isn't part of the script. Would you say that has also played a part in your experience as a band member? Did such
Look, the thing that comes immediately to mind is just comfort on a stage, right? Comfort in front of people, and being able, being comfortable in front of a room and performing to some extent or another. I think that came from that. The ability to hide or improvise mistakes that happen. I remember we did this as a band all the time, and nobody ever knew, really, unless they knew a particular song of ours very, very well. And some things like that happen all the time when you're giving a speech or teaching a class or whatever it is. I remember giving a speech in Budapest one time at a craft conference in front of 2,000 people, and the screen kept going out. My slides are up there in front of, and it kept flickering and going out, and it was just a question of what do you do? Do you just sort of collapse and be like, well, the slides are gone, I can't do anything? Or do you keep going? And I think a lot of that drive and that ability to land on my feet in those situations came from being in that band and putting on so many shows.
And I'll say it helps that you knew your content as well, because if you had just read it 10 minutes before and you got on the stage, then it would be a different thing.
It would not have gone well. Yes.
Okay. Now I understand you have a BA mass communication, and you also went on to do a master's in human factors and information design. And in your previous life, you used to be a software designer.
Correct.
So how did the winding road go from band member, through the academics to Jeff we know today? From software designer to now.
Yeah, it's interesting. It's a great question. The rockstar thing didn't work out. For you, there's 1,000 reasons, but I think the bottom line is we just weren't good enough. That's probably where it netted out. But
and you were getting married. You said you met your wife.
I was getting married. Yeah, and having no money doesn't. Those two things don't really play well together. And so the band thing was ending, and the web was starting. So we're looking at the late 90s at this point, just to kind of date myself a little bit. We're looking at the late 90s, and in the late 90s, as the band was the last band that I was in was winding down, the internet was coming up, and I'd always been prone, to computers and a little bit of computer programming, just very basic stuff, and I started building websites, basic, brochure websites for my band and for other bands. And I taught myself HTML to be able to do that. And then as the band was winding down, Web 1.0 was happening. And, back in 1999, if you could spell HTML, you could get a job. And so I could do a little bit more than that. I did a little bit of graphic design, a little bit of HTML. And so I got a job because it was easy to get a job back then. They took a lot of risks on people, and we learned on the job. And that's what kicked things off. That got me doing web design. And shortly thereafter, I moved into information architecture, which was a brand new term and a brand new field, as defined in a book by Lou Rosenfeld and Peter Morville called Information Architecture for the World Wide Web. And that book really changed my life, because it gave me a sense that instead of just doing kind of the last step in the process, which was the markup and the design portion, I could move further up the waterfall, if you will, in the website creation process and do a lot of the information architecture. And that was great. And that really spoke to me. And having sort of landed in that position, as the web evolved and became more interactive and information architecture expanded into more fields showed up into interaction design, UI design, UX design, I expanded my skill set into that world. And then that really began the trajectory of starting to build design teams and then going into product management, eventually launching our own studio, our own firm. And then finally, after the end of that studio, selling that studio, going out on my own and teaching all this stuff. But that's sort of like how I went from band to the web and everything. And there's a lot. I skipped a lot of steps there, but that's the story in general.
Thanks for that, Jeff. And I think you also told part of your story in your book, Forever Employable, How to Stop Looking for Work and Let Your Next Job Find You. Since we're already on this topic, could we just delve into that? So you said something in that book about, in your job as a software designer, information architect, I can't remember the exact role you had, but you had an aha moment where you felt, you quoting this in my own words, I'm not quoting your book exactly, but you felt like you could always be replaced in that role, and you wanted to carve out a niche where you are always in demand. Do you want to tell that story in your words so that I stop butchering it further?
Yeah, I mean, look, it was interesting. I kind of I progressed in my career in the same way that most people progress in their career the way that my parents told me, sort of the world works. You go to college, you get a job. It took me, there's a little, band break in there for me, but I got my first job, and then you work hard for a few years and you get a promotion, and then you move to another company and you get a raise, and you just kind of move your way, you climb your way up the corporate ladder. And that's what I did. I did that for a decade. And I clawed my way up into middle management like everybody does, or like most folks do. And when I turned 35, on the morning, in fact, of my 35th birthday, is how the story goes in the book, I kind of woke up in a panic. I was concerned, like you said, that this wasn't going to last. I was going to become more expensive. The number of opportunities available to me available to anyone as you climb the corporate ladder gets smaller and smaller and smaller, right? Exactly, right? That's by design, right? You want fewer managers and more people doing the work. And I was genuinely concerned that I was going to run out of it. I was going to get fired. I was hiring people at the time, and the people that were hiring were younger than me. They were smarter than me, faster than me, they were better than me, and they cost a lot less than me. And so I was really worried. And I saw this with my friends too. I had friends who were maybe 5 years older than me who were struggling with this very thing. They were struggling to find a job or stay employed and stay relevant. And I was terrified. I was terrified I wasn't going to be able to feed my kids. That was the big thing for me. And so I made an explicit decision when I turned 35 that I was going to stop chasing jobs. Like, as the subtitle of the book says, How to Stop Looking for Work and Let Your Next Job Find You. I was going to stop looking for work, and I was going to create a situation where jobs were constantly finding me, where opportunities were finding me. Because that way, if something happens to my current job, well, there's a stream of inbound opportunities available to me. And to kind of cut to the chase here, the way that I decided to do that, and the way that I write about in the book, is through thought leadership. That's it. Like, that's the recognized expertise, personal branding, right? Becoming somebody who people know, and somebody who can help solve specific problems. And that's what I did. And look, it took me years, a lot of years, to really build up my reputation and my profile. And I've done it to an extent, and it's impressive to me today to see how many people are doing it so much faster than me. Now, you can credit it to the tools that's available to them, the nature of conversation online these days that's fundamentally different than it was 10 or 15 years ago. And these folks are just kind of nailed the system here. But it's thought leadership is what's worked for me to do that.
And I'll say, yes, there are people who might have done it faster than you did, but there is this saying that if I'm able to see as far as I did, is because I'm standing on the shoulders of giants. So it's credit to you for sharing your experience, because it's helping us to know what to do moving forward.
Look, and I think that that's the benefit here, right? I think I talk about this in the book, right? About sharing generously, giving back to the community, helping people avoid the mistakes that you made, helping them skip a step. And to me, that's, a lot of folks would see that as well, aren't you enabling the competition? No, I'm helping the community get collectively better. And eventually, I hope that if I get to a position of need, the community will help me. That's what I hope. I don't expect it, but that's what I hope happens.
Yeah. So how did you go about setting up the systems then? Because you got this realization, oh my gosh, I may be obsolete in my current role faster than I'd rather admit. You said, okay, you're going to be a thought leader. How did you decide on what area to start from, and how did you then go about setting up the systems and the structure you have right now that are helping you?
The first thing was really to decide what I wanted to be known for. In the book, we call it planting your flag, but it's a question of, well, if I'm going to be a thought leader, if I'm going to build a personal brand of some kind, if I'm going to be known for something, what is that thing? And our natural tendency is to go for professional things. What do I know best at work? What do I do best? So I'm a project manager, a product manager, I'm an Agile coach, I'm a software developer, I'm a designer. But it doesn't have to be professional. It could be personal, right? I told you I play piano, and I happen to really love old vintage electric pianos. And I used to have a fairly large collection of vintage electric pianos. I could have built my thought leadership around vintage electric pianos, right? And it's viable to an extent, but the target audience here, so this is where kind of the product management hat comes on, right? The target audience is tiny. It's tiny. Like, even if you took all the keyboard players in the world, right, and then all those keyboard players who play vintage electric pianos, which is a subset, and all the people who care about this kind of stuff, I mean, it's still an infinitely smaller audience than, say, web design or product management, or even agile software development, or things like that, where I ultimately ended up. And so I chose that I wanted to be known for user experience design, and more importantly, UX design with Agile, because that's the problem that I was solving at the time, or solving for at the time. And nobody had a really good answer for it when we started solving for it. And that, to me, felt like an opportunity. And then that was so then I started doubling down on that. And what that meant was starting to write, starting to share generously, speaking at conferences, getting on podcasts, things like that, and really starting to, at the very least, tell the story of the work that we were doing at the time. I was the director of UX at the Ladders in New York City at the time. And we were working on a daily basis, on a sprintly basis, to tackle the challenge of good user experience design and Agile together. So that's what I was writing about. And that eventually led to Lean UX, the book. But that's how it all started, and that's where the focus was.
Okay. And how have you then set up the structure? Do you have a team currently, or do you work in a lean manner?
So these days, there is a system, and there's a team. It's interesting. Years ago, I did a gig in the UK. See, I said gig. It comes out naturally, like I told you. I did a gig in the UK for rentalcars.com in Manchester. And at the time, their head of product, or chief product officer, was this fascinating woman named Supriya Uchil. And she was a fantastic client. I really enjoyed working with her. And when the gig was over, she emailed me. She said, "Hey, would you like to hear some feedback about what it's like to work with you?" No client has ever done that, by the way, not
That'll be
before
gold.
and not since. And I said, absolutely. I would love to get some feedback about what it was like to work with me. And she gave me a bunch of feedback, a lot of the work, and I took a lot of notes and I took a lot of post-it notes. One of those post-it notes has stuck with me for years now. It still sits here on my whiteboard. I still have it here. It says, outsource the work you hate. It shows. Right? And that's what she said to me. And she said, look, it's obvious to me that you hate doing sales. She goes, every time we had to have a sales conversation, you were clearly uncomfortable and not really into it. Right? She was right. I hate doing sales. I really do. And so over the years, as I've built this business, as it's grown, as it's become a viable, successful business, business of one per se, I have built a team of outsourced professionals to support a lot of the work that I do today. So for example, I have a content marketing team. Now that team takes content that I create and they repurpose it across multiple channels. And they help me build, my email newsletter, and they help me build my LinkedIn presence and other things like that. It's my content, but they do all of that work. In addition to that, I've outsourced all my accounting. I have a fantastic accountant who works with businesses, only with businesses like mine. And so they understand my business and my way of working. Everything's online, everything's digital, and that's super helpful. There is a woman that works for me part-time who basically handles the entire logistics of my business. Scheduling, calendaring, travel. And then on top of that, she also handles biz dev and sales for me. And so that, to me, all that does is it removes all the things out of my way that I hate doing. And it leaves me with a tremendous amount of free time to do the things that I love doing, which is content creation and delivery. And that has made the ability to generate that content and distribute that content far more efficient and successful. And I'm super grateful to be able to, to be in a position to be able to do that. And it supports the lifestyle that I'm trying to create. And it allows me to focus on the things that I truly enjoy doing.
Thanks for sharing that. That's really insightful. Now, going back to something you said earlier about putting on your product management hat. There are some people in the audience who might be wondering, okay, what would you define a product as? Is it always something tangible? Or could we expand that word to mean anything that someone consumes, which might also be intangible? For example, going to a show, would a show be called a product?
That's a great question. The simplest definition that I've used and that I like for product is the way an organization delivers and captures value. To me, that's a product. Now, that product could be a service, right? And I don't want to open up that can of worms.
Can of worms.
Yeah. You asked me if there were no-go areas. I forgot one. Yeah. Is it a product or is it a service? I don't want to talk about that because there's no winning. There's no right answer and there's no winning there. But it's the way an organization delivers and captures value. So if you're a band and you deliver a show, that's how you deliver value. And if you capture value, like you sell tickets to that show and merchandise and maybe streaming revenue, then your product is the music and the show. So yeah, absolutely, right? That's the way that you capture value. And so to me, that's the simplest definition, the way an organization delivers and captures value.
Thanks for that definition. And this leads me to my next question, which is, so how does it relate to the discipline of product management? What does a product manager do then?
I believe that product managers are navigators of uncertainty. So product manager's job is to take an idea, right? Or the way an organization delivers value and to take it from concept to market to successful business. Now, the challenge with that is that we live in a continuously changing world. The pace of that change is increasingly faster. And this idea that you can confidently predict exactly what to do, how to do it, when to do it, and be right all the time is false. There's just too much change in the world. I mean, think back 3 years ago, right? The world was radically different 3 years ago than it is today. Radically different from 10 years ago. We could not have predicted the things. I mean, I started my job at the Ladders in New York City. I talk about this in October of 2008. Everything was going great in the early part of October 2008, right? We had a roadmap, we had plans. And 3 weeks after I started my brand new job as director of user experience, Lehman Brothers melts down.
Yes.
And the financial crisis ensues, right? And we're a job market site. And all of a sudden, the whole ecosystem's upside down. And so I believe that the product manager is a navigator of uncertainty. They take a specific set of skills, a specific set of qualities like curiosity and humility, and they build a process for de-risking the product idea and maximizing its chances for success. That's what I believe product managers do at a very high level. How that manifests will vary from Google to Bank of America to Boeing to whatever, to I'm trying to think of something like Cisco, the food service people, or whatever, right? Like every organization is going to do product management differently for a variety of reasons, domain, industry context, corporate politics, blah, 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 technology stack, whatever. But at the end of the day, I think if you're looking sort of fundamentally, what a product manager does is they help a team navigate the uncertainty of product development. That's their job.
I dare say that even within a sector, or even an industry, the way it's carried out could also vary from company to company. Would you?
100%.
Yeah.
100%. I mean, it's absolutely true. And so I think to say like, oh, I did product management at Google, so I'm a great product manager. Well, you might have been a great product manager at Google. Congratulations. Right? Does that mean that you're going to be a great product manager at, Barclays? I don't know. Right? You're going to bring that skill set to bear in a completely different environment, in a completely different industry. So I think if you've got the fundamentals in place, you'll do great. But trying to sort of copy and paste what you did at Google very tactically into a different environment, I don't think it's going to work. I mean, happy to be proven wrong, but I don't think it's going to work.
So what are the fundamentals then that a product manager would have that would give them a higher chance of success, transferable success from one area to another?
I'm going to talk about two qualities that I believe are fundamental to the success of a product manager, and then kind of four things to keep in mind. And I think that to me, those are the fundamentals. I think that the two qualities that a product manager needs to have is humility and curiosity. I think all successful product managers are humble and curious. And those are really two sides of the same coin. Let's be honest. Okay. There are two different ways to describe a very similar quality in a person. Now, humility simply means people misunderstand humility. People think humility is a lack of vision or a lack of conviction or a lack of ideas.
Or being a doormat.
Yeah, exactly. And it's not. Humility simply says that, look, I'm going to use my expertise and my experience to come up with a strong opinion about what we should do. However, in the face of evidence that contradicts my strong opinion, I'm willing to change course. That's humility. That's saying, you know what? I was wrong about this. The evidence proves that I was wrong, so we're going to change course. The curiosity side of the story is the excitement in finding out if you were right or wrong. Right? And to me, those two fundamental qualities of a person make for excellent product managers. Somebody who's willing to admit that they were wrong about their strong opinion, and somebody who's excited to find out if they're right or wrong about their strong opinion, and curious to see if maybe there's a better way. Right? I think this is a good idea, but there's got to be a better way. No, let's go find it. Mm-hmm. To me, that makes for excellent product managers. So those are the fundamental sort of personality qualities. I think those are really hard to teach. I think you can train people to some extent, but ego's tough, and humility challenges the ego a lot, and so do the facts, for that matter. Facts challenge the ego a lot. The evidence you collect from the market. So then there's that, and I think the four sort of things to keep in mind for excellent sort of transferable product management are customer centricity, agility, evidence-based decision-making, and continuous learning and improvement. So a lot of agile concepts in there. You'll hear sort of a lot of agile concepts. You could argue all of them are agile concepts, although not exactly how all agile is implemented these days, but nevertheless. So customer centricity, first and foremost, right? As a curious and humble product manager, your primary focus is making the customer successful, not shipping features, making the customer successful. That means understanding the customer, understanding the problem that you're solving for them, understanding what's getting in their way, understanding what they're doing today, understanding how the competition is solving this problem for people, understanding technology and how you might apply it to better solve this problem, understanding where the market is going so that you get ahead of it, you don't get caught behind, right? But it's all about understanding the customer. What are customers looking for? What are they trying to achieve? What's getting in their way? And really knowing them, not just quantitatively, but qualitatively, meeting them, talking to them, having regular conversations. To me, that's the first sort of key quality of a successful product manager. The second is agility, and that stems directly from those qualities of humility and curiosity. Agility is the ability to change course. It's the willingness to change course. It's the flexibility to say, we started going down this path, and I know we've spent a couple of sprints heading down this path, but it doesn't make sense anymore. And so we're going to change course. And we burned 2 sprints on this, and that sucks. And I'm sorry. But we didn't burn 2 months on it. We didn't burn 6 months on it, right? And so we're going to shift to something more successful because of what we've learned in the past. And that brings me to the third point, which is evidence-based decision-making. So those course corrections are being made based on data that you're gathering from the market, qualitative data, quantitative data, that lets you know that, this is a good path to go down, or you know what, we really needed to pivot here, or to completely change course into something else. But you're making decisions based on data, not just opinion. And then finally, this continuous learning and improvement. This is that curiosity that says, we did a good job. We solved the problem. The product's successful. Great. How do we make it better? How do we keep learning whether or not this still makes sense? Right? To me, that's what makes for successful product managers, right? Those are those multiple focus areas and 2 core qualities of humility and curiosity. I think that's what makes for good product managers.
That's awesome. Thank you for that. And would you have, you do in your books, you've shared lots of war stories where, you had experience with product management or product leadership. And to the audience, I'll say read the books, but is there any example maybe that comes to mind of someone who was a product manager that you don't have to name names, you don't have to share details, but that kind of brought to life all these personal qualities and focus areas and how that affected the work?
Look, I've worked with a ton of remarkable folks over the years. I think I started really meeting folks who were working this way when I met folks like Janice Frazier, who in fact came up with the phrase strong opinions loosely held, which is exactly what I was just describing a few minutes ago. Janice has built multiple businesses and has really helped pioneer these ideas into the sort of the mainstream. And I've seen her repeatedly do this. Eric Ries, with the Lean Startup,
Yes.
really brought a lot of these ideas to light in a very easy to digest way, hence the success of his work in the past. And he lived this stuff in the businesses that he's built over the years. I had a colleague and coworker and co-founder in a business named GIF Constable. Most recently, GIF was the chief product officer at Meetup, but he's been a serial entrepreneur his whole life. GIF really embodied these ideas. Like, he's a smart guy, tons of experience, really great ideas, but he would test them all. And if he didn't get evidence that convinced him that they were right, he was willing to change course. And I learned a ton from working with him and building businesses with him. And it was inspirational because in many ways, I appreciated his ruthlessness. It's hard. This is personal stuff. It's my idea. All my ideas are great. I love my ideas, right? And he loved his ideas, but he was very, very good at separating emotion and evidence. And I really learned a ton from him as well. So those are three folks that kind of come to mind immediately.
Thanks for that. It reminds me, in terms of what you said about GIF being ruthless, I think is a term in journalism, to kill your darlings, because you could write an article or, write your first draft and you're so in love with it, but by the time the editor brings out their red pen or something and starts striking it out, you have to separate emotion from
that's
the work,
exactly
the
right.
love. Yeah, okay.
Kill your darlings is the reality of this, of good product management. It's if the data doesn't prove it out, and the data we're looking for is changes, meaningful, positive changes in the behavior of the customers that we're serving. And if the data doesn't show it, then no matter how brilliant this idea was, how much you love it, how much you thought it was just revolutionary, it doesn't make sense to continue to invest in it. You got to figure out a different way.
I'd love to get your take on the terms, vision and strategy. How would you define these terms? Would be my first question. And my second question, and I'm happy to share this again, is how would you then tie this to, for example, product development? How should they influence product development?
So look, a couple things. There are, I'm not going to lie to you. I struggle a little bit with, vision and mission. Strategy is clear to me, but like differentiating between vision and mission, some will say a vision is what will the world look like in 5 years or something like that? Or if you're successful, what changes will you see in the world? That type of thing. Whereas a vision is sort of like the big motivational, like, what was it for Google? Like cataloging all the world's data. That was their vision, right?
Can I give you my own take? So my understanding of mission is more like, okay, what do we stand for? We're going to save the world. And vision is like, okay, in this amount of time, this is how we're saving the world. So it's kind of a picture from the future. Say if we travel into 5 years into the future and we see our customers, how are they behaving? What exactly does the world look like for us? But mission tends to remain constant. That's my understanding anyway.
Okay. Yeah. And so to me, look, it's directional, right? In the sense of like, we are, we're going to make sure everyone has clean drinking water, like clean drinking water for everybody, right? Is that our mission or our vision? I don't know. Or maybe that's the mission, and the vision is, a world where no one's thirsty. I think you need that in the sense that, like, you need to know sort of at a high level what problem is the company solving for in the world. I think that's important, right? Because I think that inevitably there are going to be initiatives that seem to stray from that. At the very least, you can point and say, look, isn't our mission to bring clean drinking water to everybody in the world? And why are we like investing in a sports website, That doesn't make any sense. Right? So at the very least, it gives us that perspective. Strategy, however, and I think strategy is really, really, really important. Strategy is super important for aligning the organization so that everybody is pulling in the same direction, so that everybody is clear on what the short-term goals are for the organization. And it gives people, if done correctly, it gives people the freedom to experiment and learn to figure out the best ways to achieve the strategy. Because I do believe that strategy is a hypothesis, right? Our hypothesis is that we want to expand into the North American market in 2024. Okay, great. Let's figure out all kinds of ways where we might start to build some market share in North America in 2024. Right. And to me, I think that that is the true benefit of strategy. I think that it can also be misused, at least for alignment that's very specific. Our strategy is North American market share, and we're going to do it this way. And you can get very prescriptive with that. Now, everybody's aligned. Everybody knows what we're doing, but it doesn't allow for the flexibility and that push and pull that ultimately reveals a better way to do something, or is more creative or more innovative. And so I think strategy is key. It's key to articulate it clearly and simply. It's key to disseminate it clearly and simply across the organization. And I think no team in the organization should have their project approved if they can't clearly state how they believe this might help achieve the strategy. That's what I believe.
And on that note, so you said no project or team should have their initiative approved unless they can show how it helps move the needle towards the desired strategy, the direction of travel of the organization. I suppose that's what you mean, the organization's direction of travel or what they want to achieve.
Yeah.
Now, how? Because one of the shiny new objects, or well, not an object per se, but more like a buzzword is OKRs, objectives and key results. So how can we use that, or let's say, can it be used to help with tying strategy with the work that, the lower levels of the organization might be doing?
I think it's critical to be able to tie the pieces together. Now, I don't expect an individual contributor necessarily to be able to do that, but certainly their manager can say, hey, team, we're working on this very tactical thing because it's a component of these 5 other tactical things that when you put them together, they roll up and they achieve this much more meaningful thing together. Right? And so, I think that there needs to be a clear, and it's rare. Look, let's be honest, right? Everyone in the organization needs to understand what the strategic focus is for the next 6 to 12 months. Okay. And again, if you can't speak directly to why you're working on the thing that you're working on, then your boss should be able to answer that question for you.
So it's really about, what I'm hearing you say is that there needs to be a strategic focus for an organization, at least that looks ahead 6 to 12 months into the future to say, okay, this is what we're going to be doing. And for teams, they have to find a way of articulating how they are contributing to that strategic focus, to the fulfillment of that strategic focus. Now, how can OKRs be used? I know you said, okay, individual contributors may not necessarily use that, but in the situations where you feel they apply, how could they be, and by they, I mean OKRs, objectives and key results, how could this format help?
OKRs to me are the key to bringing this alignment. So if there's a clear strategy, and without a clear strategy, the OKRs don't help. Okay. But if there's a clear strategy and we've set success criteria for that strategy, for that strategic hypothesis, then we can start to say, okay, great. We are our strategic focus for 2024 is North American expansion. We'll know we've achieved it when, we've got 10% market share, this much revenue, and a, new customer referral rate of 20%, something like that, right? All of a sudden, the organization knows what it's targeting, not only what the strategic focus is, but the actual behavior change that we're looking for. So fundamentally, every team in the organization can then start to say, okay, we work on X, and X is a leading indicator of Y, and Y is a leading indicator of market share. Okay, so the objective, while it should be local to the team, as well as the key results, they function as leading indicators for the strategic goal, right? So let's try to make an example on the fly, right? So we're talking about North American expansion in 2024. Let's assume that we are in the online furniture business, something along those lines, right? And so if maybe you work on a merchandising team, and so there, in order to do proper merchandising, you need access to specific suppliers, right? And so there is a team that does supplier and vendor relations, right? That team understands that for the merchandising team to be successful, they've got to build these relationships with these vendors. So their OKR is going to be about building those relationships, right? Those relationships in turn allow the proper merchandising to take place, which then allows for the proper, for market share to grow in the North American market, for example. So, but that connection you can literally draw it on a board, because people understand the strategy. And so objectives and key results become the sort of the tactical strategic beacons for each of the teams. Each team knows exactly what they're targeting and why, and they understand, in theory, how it might help achieve the overall strategy. Which again is a hypothesis. It might be wrong, but at the very least, they've got a shared direction.
Thank you for that example. There's something you said about the leading indicators. So I assume that would fall under the key results part, because you'd have the objective, which is like the ambitious statement, and then the key results are like, this is what success looks like in terms of achieving that broad statement, the objective. Now, I've read articles from respected thought leaders who say, okay, yes, leading indicators are good, but there also needs to be, the lagging indicators, kind of a balance of, measures, leading, lagging, and quality indicators. I don't know if you have any. I'd love to hear what your view would be on this, because if we're only looking at leading indicators, there might be a temptation to just be short term in our thinking and not also try to measure the lagging indicators, like, okay, the actual revenue or the profit that you get versus our likelihood of getting that revenue.
Yeah, so look, short answer is both are important, I think, obviously, and I think both are required. Slightly longer answer is the lagging indicators in an organization often tend to be what we call the impact metrics for the organization, the high-level measures of the health of the business. Like you said, revenues, sales, customer satisfaction, et cetera, right? So yeah, those things need to exist. Typically, they exist at the leadership level. And so then whatever's happening within the teams tends to function as a leading indicator, ultimately, to those sort of high-level lagging indicators, right? So we're going to, I've got a team working on email marketing, and they're working on email market open and click rates, right? Those are leading indicators of eventual sales, and those sales are leading indicators of revenue, which is a lagging indicator of the health of the business. And so to me, both are needed. Typically, the lagging indicators tend to be at the strategic and the leadership level.
I read on your blog post that you have another book coming up. Whilst we're on the subject of OKRs, and you're going to be, or you are in the process of co-authoring yet another book with your co-author, Josh Seiden.
Yeah.
Yeah. Could
My
you
buddy.
tell us about that?
Absolutely. So Josh and I have been working and writing together for a long time. We have been talking about outcomes and OKRs together for a long time. And we feel there's an opportunity in the marketplace to write a tactical how-to implementation guide for all organizations of all size. And that's what we're doing. It doesn't have a title yet. We do have a website at okr-book.com where you can sign up and learn a bit more about it and then kind of be on the mailing list when we do have more info about it. We're writing it right now. To be honest, I've been writing it in public for the last 2 years on my blog every week at 500 to 700 words at a time. All those, just kind of getting those ideas out there and experimenting to see what works and what doesn't, and what gets feedback and what doesn't. And that's been super helpful. And I expect this to be a popular book, and I expect this to be a very helpful and tactical book for organizations who are going through the process of implementing OKRs and are trying to make them work both as a goal-setting framework, but also in truly understanding the kinds of changes to ways of working that come after you've implemented OKRs, agilities of agile ways of working, product discovery, lean UX, right? Those types of activities as well to help teams build that evidence-based decision-making that we talked about earlier.
Awesome. Is there any time frame, or do we just go to the website you mentioned and sign up to get more updates on the book as they unfold?
okr-book.com. That's the website.
Yes. And when do we expect it to be released?
October.
This October.
That's the plan. Yeah.
Awesome. So that would also be in the show notes. Are there any books or materials that you have found yourself gifting or recommending to people that have impacted or shaped the way you think right now? I mean, that is in addition to your, Sense and Respond book, Lean UX. Unfortunately, I don't have the physical copy of the Forever Employable ones. But yeah, are there other books that you could recommend to us?
Yeah, I think so. Recently, I've read Tony Fadell, his book Build.
Okay.
So Tony Fadell of Apple and Nest and various other fame. Build is a really good book and really interesting insight as to how he works and builds products. And most recently, I just finished the new book by Rick Rubin, legendary music producer Rick Rubin. It's called The Creative Act. And I found that book to be fascinating and really inspiring. I mean, it's a guru, and he's very like, listen to this, get into the zone and just the flow. And, so there's a lot of that fluffy guru kind of stuff in there too. But I agreed with 90% of what I read in there about creativity, about working with an idea, about developing an idea, about getting feedback on an idea, about letting an idea go, about changing context and constraints to create more creativity and innovation. And I really enjoyed it. So it's called The Creative Act. It's by Rick Rubin, and it's an easy read. And I would recommend that if you're looking for that kind of motivation. I think it was really smart.
Awesome. Is there anything else you'd like to ask of the audience?
I just hope that if you've got anything you'd like to ask me, don't hesitate to get in touch via Twitter or LinkedIn or my website. If you're interested in OKRs, do sign up for my newsletter and go to okr-book.com and sign up there. And beyond that, I hope to see you online or in person sometime in the future, because it's nice to meet people in person again these days.
Great. Thank you very much, Jeff, for these. Any final words of wisdom for the audience before we go?
The pithy phrase I'll close with is this: do less more often. That's the phrase that I would recommend for you.
Wow. Do less more often.
Yep.
I am going to be pondering on that statement. Thank you so much, Jeff. It's been an honor, speaking with you, learning from you, and I hope we would get the opportunity to do this again, hopefully.
Thank you, Ula. This was amazing. Thanks for having me on the show.
That's all we have for now. Thanks for listening. If you like this show, do subscribe at www.agileinnovationleaders.com. That's agileinnovationleaders.com or your favorite podcast provider. Also share with friends and do leave a review on iTunes. This would help others find this show. I'd also love to hear from you, so please drop me an email at ola@agileinnovationleaders.com. Take care and God bless.